Hi, everybody. This is Gertrude Mache again here on the Her Story podcast. I have yet another amazing woman who is coming all the way from the United States. Pamela Sharpe, welcome.
Hi, Gertrude. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not Gertrude, it's Gertrude, which is a different name from what we have in the States. How are you?
I am good, thank you. Please tell everybody exactly where you are, how old you are, and just share your story with us this afternoon.
Great. I am here in Alexandria, Virginia, which is right outside of DC, about 20 minutes outside of Washington, DC. Originally not born here. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, in the Midwest. So now I'm on the East Coast, and I love it here. I've been here for about 35 years.
Okay.
I moved here from Dallas, Texas.
Oh, wow. Wow.
and decided to stay. It's a wonderful place to live and raise your children. I'm 58.
You're 58 years old? Okay.
58 years old. I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. And I believe, as I say, I have a wonderful life. My children still love me. They like being around me, and we're friends. So that makes life wonderful. I guess I left home when I was around 21. I moved from Chicago to Dallas, Texas. And I believe my life, I was spiritual at the time, but I believe once you get out on your own, you kind of lose yourself. You start picking up different ways of doing things.
Yes.
You forget, right. You forget that you are a spiritual being and you want to fit in sometimes, or let's be real, you get into a relationship and it really becomes no longer all about you, it's about them.
Yes.
And you make sacrifices and we settle. And that's what happened in my life. I believe a lot of the things that happened in my life were things that I brought upon myself because I settled. I wasn't staying true to myself. And because of that, I had to deal with the consequences of those actions. One of my relationships, I was 26. I was in a relationship with an older man who I was just crazy about because he was older, he was smart, he was charismatic, he had his own business, and all of that great stuff. But the sad thing of the of the whole relationship was that I found out he was married. And I didn't stop dating him because by then I was like crazy in love. I'm a young kid, basically, in love with this man. And I lost myself. And that was really the first time I could say I lost myself. And getting into this type of relationship as a young woman who is a spiritual woman, who comes from a family of proud people, wonderful people who have a high sense of moral code, was I'll say hell, if I could say that.
Yeah. So
right?
Your conscience just would not allow you to stay there.
Yes. Yes. And that's the struggle when you are not being true to yourself, when you're living against your spiritual being, your true spiritual base, you're really in hell because it's a constant struggle every day. You're no longer yourself, you're somebody else. And you never quite feel comfortable, you never quite feel worthy of good things happening to you because in the back of your mind and your subconscious, you're saying to yourself, I'm bad.
Yeah.
Right? And the type of person that I am, I would never want to hurt another person purposely.
Yes.
And the whole concept of being in a relationship with someone who's married, you're hurting somebody. no matter what the story is that you're being told, your subconscious mind is still hitting you saying, no, common sense. So at a young age, I was impressionable, and this relationship basically tore me down from this positive person, happy person, to I became depressed for the first time in my life ever. I was depressed, and I remember being so depressed. And it took my brother to save me. And everybody should have a family member that saves them. And my brother saved me because I was so depressed. I wasn't working. At the time, I wasn't. At one time throughout this relationship, I had even become homeless, but not the homeless that most people, not the real homeless, because I had friends who took me in. But that's still homeless, and it's still depressing, and it's still not what God, as a child of God, a spiritual person, not where you should be in your life. And so that was a time my brother, he sent for me, and I came home, went home to mommy, and mommy nurtured me back, got me back on the right path. I built up my sense of being, my belief, my faith. I got my joy back. I got my self-esteem back and my purpose back. And from that point on, I promised myself I would never do anything like that again. And I just realized that those types of relationships aren't meant to build you up, because you're lying to yourself all the time. And once I stopped lying to myself, I could honor myself again.
Yes.
You see, I couldn't even honor myself. I couldn't even love myself because I was hurting somebody else. And people wonder why, they continue in these types of relationships. A lot of it is manipulation, and I want people to understand that. It's manipulation. People prey on you. In my situation, it was always, please don't do this to me. You're going to make me so sad. I can't live without you. I love you, and you feel like you can't tear yourself away. And I had to basically get on my knees and ask God to save me. And he saved me in the form of my son, my brother, who sent for me. And I never looked back since. I never looked back. And so then I came to this area and had, I was still young, so I worked and was doing very well until I met my husband. At the time, I got married, had a beautiful little girl. In the meantime, I'm sorry, my brother, who sent for me and saved me, he passed away. Oh. And it was a heart-wrenching time in my life. He had AIDS and he passed away. And during that time, I met my husband. So this is another segue to another story and another lesson. Wow. And at that time, I met my soon-to-be husband. And when you're living in the spirit, which I'll say, I'm not saying being a holy roller or anything like that, and it's nothing being negative or anything, but when you are having conversations with spirit daily, spirit will always give you the answers that you seek. But you have to be quiet and listen to them, and then you have to obey. I always tell people, when things happen to them, they'll say, well, why did somebody do this to me? And why did somebody do that? And somebody played me. And I'll always come back with, no one did anything to you. You walked right into it. Mm-hmm. There were signs. but you chose to go the other way.
Your signs
Jesus
are
said,
always there, right?
they're always there because Jesus said, I forgive you, but go and sin no more, or else worse things will befall you. And when you think of that statement, you have the free will. So if you ask for the truth and you get the truth, but you don't like what you get, and you still do what you want, and you still want to be with that person, and then the person bites you, they didn't do anything to you that you didn't invite. So with me and my marriage, so I was my brother was going through this transition, and I was taking care of him, and I met this man, and no lie at all, when I met him, as I walked away, Spirit says, a nice person, but not marriage material. That was in my head. It was right there. And I was like, okay, good. I got that. But then, as my brother started getting sicker and sicker, he was there all the time, helping me, doing all of the right things and everything. So then I get into this relationship with this person. I marry him, even knowing that I got the message. I did get the message. It was downloaded. There was nothing in there that left a doubt. It was clear, but I did not follow. And so what happened was I married someone who was not for me. He wasn't raised as I was raised. He had different ideas of how to communicate, and just one of my deal breakers is always a person who doesn't take responsibility for their actions. I don't believe in victimhood. And so all of these things, and he was a arguer, not a debater, not a conversationalist, not a person who would say, I'll agree to disagree. It was always a fight. It was always a challenge. But he was raised in a house where you could curse people, use profanity when you're, having these discussions. And if you get heated, it was okay with him to do that, but I wasn't. And I've always believed that when you love people, you talk to them a certain way.
Yes.
So, this went on. We had my daughter. I already had a son when we got married. So I had my son, my daughter, and then we had another beautiful child. And I wasn't happy. I was miserable. And in my eyes, if I'm miserable, you're miserable too. Yeah. Because one person can't be in a marriage miserable and the other person is not. Let's be true. We have to be truthful about this. So again, I prayed and I prayed because I did not want my daughters to see me in a relationship with a man who I'm supposed to love and who's supposed to love me. And he's using foul language when he speaks to me and calls me names that your husband or someone you love it's just not acceptable. And it's not something you want to continue in a relationship when you have children in the house. And I can remember my mother-in-law, who was a beautiful woman. One day we were at a function and she says, you guys, you're gonna stay together. I guess I wear everything on my face. And she can tell I wasn't happy. And she was like, well, just stay together for the kids, promise me. And I said, I'll try. But this one day after my daughters were probably 7 and 5, the argument was just so heated and all over the place. And he called me the B word and was yelling and screaming in front of my daughters, telling me to get out the house and all of this stuff. And I'm sitting in my office and my daughters are sitting there and everybody's miserable. And he leaves and I go to apologize to my daughter for her dad. And I said, I'm sorry you have to experience this. And I'm sorry, people who love each other should not speak to each other that way. I don't want you to think that this is normal and that, men and women, this is not a normal relationship. Daddy and I, we just have different ways of doing things. And my daughter says, "It's okay, mommy. I'm used to it."
Oh.
And I'm still emotional about it. And she's 24 now, but I looked at her beautiful little face and I was like, but that's not right. And so I knew at that time, that was the catalyst moment when I said to myself, I'm out of here. I have to get out of here for my children. I can't stay for my children because staying is not going to help them. Staying is going to destroy them spiritually, emotionally. They'll never know what love is and how to deal with it in a household where two people who are supposed to love them and guide them and be their role models are at war with each other every day. And
The thing that a lot of women forget, that we are the role models for our daughters. And if a small child says, I'm used to it, how heart-wrenching is that?
it's crazy.
Mm.
We have to always check in with our children.
Yeah.
And where most women fail at, and people in general, I'm not even going to say just women, but most parents don't take the time to check in with their children.
Mm.
I don't know how many times I've heard people say, I'm staying for the children. And I'll say, no, you're not.
Mm.
You're not staying for the children. You're staying for yourself. You're staying for all of the he said, she said, for them and they, and whatever crazy reasons for the house, for the material things, but you're not staying for the children. And our first priority as a parent, once we bring those beautiful babies home, is to protect them.
Yes.
And that includes from ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
so at that time, I just made up my mind. I had to stand up for myself and my children so that they could have a happy home, so that they can know that every night when they go to sleep, it's going to be peaceful and that there's going to be love.
Let me ask you this. If there's a woman out there right now who's listening to this podcast, who's in the same situation, what would your advice be for them?
Knowing that every situation is different, but my advice would be to make your plan to leave. Because if you're in the situation and it hasn't changed, it's not going to change.
Mm.
Now, I'm not against therapy, going to counseling.
Yeah.
If you can go to counseling and people are honest and they want help, then try counseling. But if it gets to the point, for me, it wasn't physical. But if it's physical, get out.
Mm.
Don't stay. There are many, many organizations that you can call. Just call and say, I need out, and leave. We get so.
What would you tell your younger self?
I would have told my younger self to never marry someone who displays any signs that are deal breakers for you. So I would have told my younger self, know what your deal breakers are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No, if you don't know who you are, you don't know what your deal breakers are.
Mm.
So before you get into a relationship, or even while you're in the relationship, sit down and say to yourself, what kind of life do I want to live? What type of mate do I want to have? And what are my deal breakers? We all know what our deal breakers are.
It's
We
so
all know, right?
yeah,
Right?
so true.
And in most cases, your deal breakers are not things that the person is willing to change, because that's why it's called a deal breaker. It's not a deal fixer, it's a deal breaker. So you have to know what your deal breakers are. I already know I can't be in a relationship with someone who doesn't accept responsibility for whatever it is they do, or someone who doesn't communicate, or someone who's not spiritual, who doesn't have a spiritual practice, at least 5 minutes a day of meditation or prayer or being grateful. Know what your deal breakers are. Your deal breaker may be you don't want to be in a household with a man who doesn't take part in chores. If that's your deal breaker, know it and don't settle. I mean, some of the best advice I would give anybody is don't settle. Don't get so desperate and caught up in the world's version of what your life should be that you settle, because the world is not going to live that life for you. Only you're going to be there.
Wow. I thank you so much for coming online today and sharing this with us.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed it.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
My hope is that this podcast will have a ripple effect across the globe, and it will, because we're on the internet.
Yes.
And somebody who's supposed to hear you today will hear you and be empowered. And that's the whole thing about this podcast series. It's a series of women sharing their personal experiences, whether they be challenges or triumphs, and empowering other women through their stories. So thank you so much for taking part.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciated it. And if at any time I can be a conduit, someone to speak with, they can contact me on all things social media.
Fantastic. Now we'll put a link to all of your websites as well on the podcast. Thank you so much, Pamela.
You're welcome. I can't wait to post this out so that everyone can know that you are doing this awesome program that is really therapy for us.
It is. It is. So sometimes it's just telling your story is healing in itself.
Yes, yes. And we all, I'm a part of other groups where